Take a look at this. These are live pictures. Donald Trump, he's campaigning in South Carolina right now. We're going to hear what he has to say shortly. There's been a war of words, as you know, with his rival Jeb Bush. Trump has been blasting Bush's brother, former President George W. Bush, the former president. He's saying failed to keep America safe since 9/11 happened on his watch. That's the charge that Donald Trump has made. In fact, let's listen in briefly to hear what he's saying.
A lot of Democrats in there, liberal Democrats. The Gang of Eight said, oh, let him come in, let him come in. Well, his poll numbers tanked, and he immediately all of a sudden got away from the Gang of Eight. You know, that's what, you don't want that because that's false. That's a false messenger. It's really a false messenger. Gang of Eight. What? Oh, medic. Oh, go ahead, take that. That's more important than all of this. Go ahead, a medic. Hopefully they're okay. Are they okay? They're okay? Oh, she just fainted. She's, you know what? That means she was excited. That's okay. Make sure she's good. Those are my best fans. The ones that faint, I love the most. That's fine. Okay, everything good over there? Okay, take your time. Take your time. Make sure she's perfect. I noticed they have a couple of ambulances right outside just in case. But that's great. I love you too. I love you too. I love you too, but I love her and I want to make sure she's okay. Is she okay? All right, good. I think they're going to be fine. Everything good? Let's get going then. So in the poll, they have, first choice is Trump by a lot. They have on the economy, pretty important, right? Trump, 67. No, how do you do that? 67. Don't forget, that's with 16 people. We had 17, but as you know, Governor Perry dropped out. And a couple of others dropped out too. So we're actually down to 15, 16. I don't even count. So many people. You go on stage, you got all these people, you don't even know who they are. But on the economy, and you have Governor Walker dropped out, a very nice guy too. Both nice people. Although they tried to kill me, they tried to get me. On the economy, Trump, 67. Second place, like nothing. Illegal immigration. We got to stop. We got to build that wall. Got to build that wall. Got to build a wall. Illegal immigration, Trump is 55. Second place is 13. Second place. Remember Bush with the act of love, right? They come for love. He's talking about a different kind of love. Look at this guy. He knows. On foreign policy, Trump 34, second place 12 and 13. On ISIS, I mean, can you believe? We used to have General Patton. We used to have, think of it. And these were unpredictable people. I need unpredictability. We are so predictable as a country. On trade, on military. Remember when President Obama said, yes, we will be leaving Iraq on this date. Right? So the enemy sat back and said, oh, why should we be fighting? Let's wait a year ago. So they go hide. We leave and they knock the hell out of everything. Many of those enemy turned out to be ISIS. We need unpredictability. Can you imagine General George Patton? Think of it. You know what I mean, right? Right. No, I'm watching television, and I'm hearing all of these dates. Yes, we're going to attack in 2 weeks. We're going to go from the front. We're then going to go here. Then they attack, and it's brutal because they're so prepared. The whole thing is crazy. But when Obama said, we're leaving Iraq, now I said we shouldn't have been in there because it's going to destabilize the Middle East. In all fairness, I was right. You know, I told you, we're going to build the greatest military. We're going to build the greatest. But we got to know when to use it. We got to know when. We got to know when to use it. Because right now, we spend $2 trillion. Think of it. $2 trillion, lost thousands of incredible people. Thousands. We have wounded warriors who I love more than anyone. We have wounded warriors all over the place. Yeah. And you know what we have because of our incompetent leaders? Nothing. Remember I said, look, you're in. Take the oil. Remember they said, that's a sovereign nation. That's a sovereign nation. That's not a sovereign nation. These are people that are not very honest people. Believe me, you've seen it. You've seen it. They have taken advantage of us to a fare thee well. I heard.
All right, so Donald Trump now getting into his stump speech, making his points. We're going to continue to monitor what he said. You also saw one person fainted there. He called for medics. The medics came. Before that, he was going after Jeb Bush. He's been going after Jeb Bush pretty seriously over these past several days, reviving this feud he's had with the former Florida governor. Dana Bash is with us looking into this part of the story. It's getting more intense and a lot more personal right now as well.
It absolutely is. You know, when it comes to Jeb Bush's brother's legacy and the impact it has on his White House run now, aides see the former president's actions around 9/11 as more of a badge of honor than an albatross. And Bush aides I talked to believe, that actually really hope, that conservative voters he needs to win the GOP presidential primary, who have been more excited about Donald Trump, won't be on the billionaire's side on this one.
A political duel about America's catastrophe on 9/11/2001 playing out in a very 2016 way on Twitter. Donald Trump tweeting today at Jeb Bush, "I'm fighting to make sure it doesn't happen again. Jeb is too soft." That after Bush had tweeted, "Donald Trump talks about foreign policy as though he's still on The Apprentice." At issue, Trump's suggestions that Jeb's brother, George W. Bush, could have done more as president to prevent the September 11th terror attacks.
Don't blame him or don't blame him, but he was president. The World Trade Center came down during his reign.
It's a delayed Trump response to one of Jeb Bush's most passionate moments at CNN's debate last month.
It was such a disaster those last 3 months that Abraham Lincoln couldn't have been elected.
You know what? As it relates to my brother, there's one thing I know for sure. He kept us safe. I don't know if you remember.
Trump is now even suggesting he could have stopped the 9/11 hijackers from getting into the U.S. in the first place.
I'm extremely tough on people coming into this country. I doubt that those people would have been in the country.
For the record, the 9/11 Commission said only 2 of the 19 hijackers overstayed their visas, but others gamed the immigration system. The commission also said the attack was a shock, but should not have come as a surprise. Still, Jeb Bush's campaign thinks Trump's latest rant handed them a winning issue.
Next week, Mr. Trump is probably going to say that FDR was around when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. It's what you do after that matters, and that's the sign of leadership.
Jeb Bush's aides knew his brother's legacy would be a challenge, especially Jeb Bush's position on the Iraq War, which he bungled early on. But 9/11?
I can hear you!
This was not something Team Bush ever dreamed would be relitigated, but they're happy to do so, using it to broaden criticism of Trump as commander-in-chief.
It looks as though he's not taking the possibility of being president of the United States really seriously.
The Bush campaign is even asking for donations with this email saying, "Donate $5 and fight back against Donald Trump."
The fact of the matter is...
Meanwhile, another Bush presidential rival, Ben Carson, also insists he would have handled 9/11 more effectively by cutting oil purchases from Arab states, forcing them to turn over the al-Qaeda leader.
It would have had a major impact on their finances, and I think that probably would have trumped any loyalty that they had to people like Osama bin Laden.
But the back and forth really has been mostly mano a mano on this Trump versus Bush. This afternoon, Trump tweeted a link to a 3-year-old New York Times story about the infamous classified presidential daily brief that George W. Bush got about a month before 9/11. It had the headline, "Bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S." So Trump is not letting up. The Bush campaign, aides I talked to say they're happy to play ball on this.
Let's discuss what's going on. I want to bring in our panel. Joining us, Dana Bash, he's still with us. Our senior political reporter, Nia Malika Henderson, is with us. Our political commentator, Ryan Lizza, the Washington correspondent for the New Yorker magazine, and our national security analyst, Peter Bergen. And Dan, I just want to make it clear, Trump is not backing down. Remember, he scored points by saying Jeb Bush was low energy. Is this new attack on him and his brother, for that matter, going to work?
You know, we'll see. This is the first time. The answer is it seems different than the others, because this is the first time that we have seen some conservatives who generally are more likely to support Trump go to Bush's side, because there is a lot of support for his brother still, and maybe even more so now. If you look at the latest poll even that we did over the summer, 88% of Republicans, and that's all that matters right now, Republicans, because it's the primary season, they think that George W. Bush should be viewed favorably. So it's a different kind of thing, particularly when you're talking about post 9/11 and keeping this country safe. They feel like they're on solid ground, but also that's why you're seeing Jeb Bush go beyond that and try to twist this and turn this into a broader commentary on what he believes is Donald Trump's inability to be commander-in-chief in foreign policy.
Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Jeb Bush about his foreign policy. Here's the bottom line question: does it help Jeb Bush to bring up his brother's legacy in a Republican contest?
I think it's complicated. The point that Dana makes is a good one, right? Almost 90% of Republicans still view George W. Bush favorably. On the other hand, if you're Jeb Bush, the thing that you have been trying to do in this entire primary campaign is what you stated at the beginning. You want to be your own man, right? And I feel like Trump is sort of pushing Jeb Bush into this corner to defend and almost hug his brother's legacy on some policies that, frankly, in a general election might not prove to be that popular. He's pushing him now not just on 9/11, but on the Iraq War. And he's sort of he's pointing out one of the weaknesses of Jeb's campaign, which is he wants to distance himself from his father and his brother in some ways. He wants to defend other aspects of their legacy. And I think the more he has to talk about why his brother did the right thing, the less he's talking about how he's his own man.
Peter, you spent a lot of time studying 9/11, the events leading up to 9/11, since 9/11. Does Donald Trump have a good point that President Bush, in the 9 or 10 months he was president before 9/11, could he have done more potentially to prevent that terrorist attack from occurring?
It's not often that you find yourself in agreement with Donald Trump, but I think he's correct on this point.
Donald Trump is correct.
Donald Trump is correct. President Bush and his advisors, if you go back and look at the public record, didn't talk about al-Qaeda or bin Laden at all before 9/11. President Bush took the longest presidential vacation in 3 decades in the summer of 2001, despite the briefing he received about bin Laden being determined to strike in the United States. They had 33 cabinet meetings before 9/11. Only one was about al-Qaeda, and that was only a week before 9/11. The CIA was doing its job, which is warning repeatedly of a potential attack, and it was basically tuned out.
So Donald Trump, you think, has a good point when he says that Bush could have done more?
Yes, I think he does.
And the 9/11 Commission basically said there were some advisors who were working with the president, the relatively new president at that time, much more worried about Saddam Hussein in Iraq than bin Laden. So they were basically saying we don't have to worry that much about bin Laden. They obviously were wrong. So how's this going to play out, Nia, right now? Donald Trump makes a very strong accusation against Jeb Bush and his brother for not doing enough to prevent 9/11 from occurring. How's it going to play out politically?
You know, I think it's a smart strategy from Donald Trump. I think he, more than anybody else in this GOP race, really knows his audience. He's been able to capture a steady 30% of the GOP bloc. Jeb Bush is still looking for a bump in the polls, still trying to figure out who his voters are. I think he is able to put Jeb Bush in a box, not only in terms of talking about his brother's legacy, but also in terms of just going on the counterattack against Donald Trump. And that's not a great place for Jeb Bush to be. He's not very comfortable there. If you looked at over these last many weeks when he's tried to get at Donald Trump, it hasn't really worked. It's also interesting. He sort of kind of pulls out the rule book on Donald Trump and says, oh, you're not a serious candidate. Look like you're somebody from The Apprentice. But guess what? That's what voters actually like from Donald Trump.
But it's funny. I'm listening to you talk about strategy, and I'm sitting here wondering whether or not this was a calculated strategy or this is more kind of go from the gut, like you see from Donald Trump.
You never tell with him.
But in that, he never got, during that debate, which you saw in my piece, it was kind of a moment for Jeb Bush, and he, Trump, never got a chance to kind of respond and retaliate. And it seems as though, just watching his initial interview on this over the weekend, that he kind of wanted a chance to do that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, and that's maybe where this is coming from, he sort of couldn't let it go. But on the flip side, the other thing I will say is that if you talk to Jeb Bush's, I think if you put truth serum in Jeb Bush's campaign aides' water, they would say that they wish that Bush, when he said that my brother kept him safe, would have said the last
9/11.
Exactly. Finish the sentence after 9/11.
Yeah, which might be what he has to do now.
And probably what he meant.
Yeah.
Trump's been at the head of the poll, top of the polls now for 3 or 4 months, and so I think it's time to ascribe some strategic smarts to most of these moves. Whenever he attacks someone, it does seem like there's a little bit of a strategy behind it. He hones in on something. And the Bush campaign, their response here depends on not allowing the debate that Peter just talked about. Their response was, oh, Ari Fleischer, former President George W. Bush's press secretary, said, that Trump sounds like a truther. They're trying to make the argument that what Trump is saying is that George W. Bush is personally responsible for the attacks. And of course, that's not what Trump's saying. Trump is saying from Inauguration Day to 9/11, there was a period of time to make Al-Qaeda a bigger priority, and the Bush administration didn't. And that's the debate that is the respectable debate, and that's the one I think that Trump is trying to have.
And the one that they'll be having on that next debate stage when they're next to each other.
How this plays in the Republican primary, I think, it's very unclear how Republican voters view that. I'm not so sure that Republican voters are on Trump's side on this one.
And Peter Bergen makes an excellent point, and a lot of people who have studied the events leading up to 9/11 totally agree with you, and in effect agree with Donald Trump. More could have been done in those months leading up to 9/11 to have prevented that attack from occurring. We're going to pick up that a whole lot more. By the way, you can watch Donald Trump tomorrow morning on CNN's New Day. That begins at 6 a.m. Eastern, only here on CNN. He'll be a live guest. Just ahead, wait until you hear Bernie Sanders' response to a very hilarious Saturday Night Live spoof of his performance in that CNN presidential debate.
I own one pair of underwear. That's it. Some of these billionaires, they got 3, 4 pairs. And I don't have a dryer. I have to put my clothes on the radiator.